Hello, and welcome to the You Know You Deserve More podcast spotlight interview series. I'm your host, Stephanie Puryear-Helling, and founder of SPH Services, leading people and teams to success. And I am so excited to introduce you to my guest today, Marcus Wilson. So before Marcus and I jump in and talk about transformational leadership, leading change, and building resilient teams, I want to tell you a little bit about Marcus. So hopefully some of you listeners, you know Marcus very well. But for those of you that don't, I want to tell you a little bit about this incredible man. So Marcus is a technology consultant, public speaker, which is how we met, by the way, speaking at a conference together, and founder and CEO of Pivotal Impact Consulting, a company that helps small to medium-sized businesses scale and thrive in the digital age. And don't we all need that? Marcus has over 20 years of experience in leading and delivering complex and profitable IT solutions, ERP and CRM implementations, and business process improvements for multi-million-dollar organizations across various industries. His mission is to leverage technology to automate repetitive tasks, optimize customer engagement, and enable data-driven decision-making. He has a strong passion for developing, mentoring, and leading high-performance teams, fostering a culture of collaboration, innovation, and excellence. And when Marcus and I were speaking at the same conference a couple years ago, both of our sessions, I sat in on Marcus's session, and then mine was, I think, right after his.
Correct. Yeah.
And we had so much in common in terms of what we were passionate about, the value we were adding. And we're both very passionate in leading successful change in organizations, because often change efforts fail. In fact, 75% of organizational change efforts fail. So Marcus, I'm so excited to have you here today. And before we jump into the questions, is there anything else that you want to tell our listeners about you?
Oh, wow. Yes. First of all, thank you for having me on the show, Stephanie. It is great to be here on this webinar. And I just thank you for the opportunity to talk about change. Change has been something that I've been dealing with for years, it seems. We all deal with it on a regular basis, both in our personal and professional lives. With technology coming into the grand scheme of everything that we do, we're constantly dealing with either updates from apps, changes at home, changes in our bodies from losing weight. I'm going through that now, exercising and everything like that. So we're constantly, change is just a part of life now. So the biggest thing now for me, and I think, is I've learned to embrace it. I've learned to embrace the change, but I've also, and by doing that, I've ran over the past, 7-8 years, I've ran 4 marathons.
Wow.
And I ran 4 marathons, something I said I would never do. I was big sports back and played football and baseball. I hated long distance running. And for some odd reason, over the past 7 years, I got into it very heavily, 8 years, I would say, and ran 4 marathons, 2 majors, and got my certification in PMP, project management professional, in order to enhance those skills to be able to communicate and deliver successful change results. So I learned to just embrace it, fall right into it, and just assist others with adopting change by orchestrating the balance between people, process, and technology.
I love it. I love it so much. So I'm so excited about this conversation. So let's jump right in.
Yeah.
And my first set of questions are around transformational leadership, because all change involves people, even though there is a huge process component and oftentimes a technology component. It's the people who are leading the change, who are managing the change, who are maybe resisting the change, right? So let's talk about transformational leadership. And my first question, your leadership has inspired teams to push beyond their perceived limits. What personal philosophy or experience has shaped your ability to lead in this way?
Oh wow. I'm gonna have to go back years and years to when I was a teenager. When I played baseball, played for the East Columbus Yankees. I would say I'm from Columbus, Georgia, and this team we weren't the most talented team in the league. And this is the thing. And at least one of the players, at least one player on our team throughout the season had a sore arm for about 2 or 3 weeks where they could not throw. Well, anyway, we were very limited in, I don't want to say skill level. We had skills. We had gifts. We were gifted, but we did, what did I say? How can I put it? We were not the most gifted team, but we had gifts. And it was the coach that came in and told us who we were, and we played to that. Pitching and defense. That's it. Pitching and defense. And the biggest thing is that we kept winning games, and people could not understand why, because we weren't that talented if you looked at it, but we kept winning games. We did more with less, and we were limited because we only had a few guys. Like I said, there were always one or two that could not throw the ball. So anyway, the biggest thing is that with the coach, we bought into who we were. We played into our strengths, and we, how could I say it? We accommodated for our weaknesses. I mean, there were times where balls were hit to the right fielder, David, his name was, and he could not throw at the time because he had a sore arm. But you would see the whole team running out the right field to help to get the ball to throw it back in. Normally, the right fielder would just get the ball, throw it back into the second base, hit the cutoff man. If you played baseball, you understand that logic. But we had to all work together to cover up our weaknesses. So biggest thing is we played to our strength. It was pitching and defense. And all of our games were like 3-2, 4-3, but we were winning. And people could not stand it. We ended up going and we ended up going to the championship game.
Wow.
First half. Awesome. Yeah, and going to the championship, and we ended up losing in championship, but it took 3 games to beat us, and we were so upset. But the coach was just amazed at what we could do with the little things that we had, and we just played together. So that kind of built that whole resilience, knowing that I don't care in any team that I've ever worked in, I don't care what we got. If you got the right attitude, if you have the right mindset, and you're willing to work, you may be limited on skill level, whatnot. We can make it happen. We can produce. And it's all about understanding who you are, where you're going, and what you're trying to do, and establishing that to the people that you support and standing behind that. So that's one of those things that really helped with resilience, understanding that we can get through this and we can be successful with what we have.
I love that so much. So as you're talking, I'm part of Maxwell Leadership, right? So I got certified in 2022, and we have an international Maxwell conference twice a year. So in March and August. And in this past March, a couple months ago, Tim Tebow was one of our keynote speakers, and I got to hear him speak on stage, and then I got to go to a special lunch with him and get to hear him speak some more. But when he was on stage, he was telling a story of his time, of course, playing football, right? And he told this story about this one player who, just based on how he was physically blessed and raw talent alone, this player should have been the star, if not one of the star players. But he wasn't, because he didn't want to put in the work that it took. He didn't want to be a team player. And it ended up, he basically just stayed this mediocre player, even though he had more raw natural talent and, physical blessings than pretty much everybody on the team. And so Tim told that story because he said, you do not, exactly as you said, you do not have to be the best. You don't have to have the natural raw talent. But what you have to do is have the right mindset, be willing to work hard, and do what it takes. And I also have a business coach, one of them. I have several, but one of my business coaches, he came from nothing. He stuttered until he was 22 years old. He came from a family full of challenges, and he just really grew up without a lot of the support that you would hope to have as a young kid. He moved from Canada to the United States when he was in his early 20s with no money, and taught himself how to stop stuttering after the age of 22. He became a millionaire in his mid-20s, made his first million. Now he's a multimillionaire. But he says, I was a D student. I stuttered until I was 22. I had all the cards stacked against me. And people come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, you're so talented. You're so brilliant. He's like, really, I'm not. But what I do probably more than anyone else is I'm willing to do what it takes, and I'm willing to work hard, and I'm willing to work on, leverage my strengths, but also work on my weaknesses where they might get me into trouble. And that's really how he came from this whole rags to riches, trial to triumph story that we hear a lot of sports figures, business people. If you listen to their story, they're not without challenge. They're not without sometimes, tragedy.
Correct.
But the way that they got there is exactly what you're saying, is through hard work, perseverance, mindset. And it's so powerful. I love that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that, and I've seen that same story, that same analogy over and over again playing sports, meaning just like Tim Tebow. Because I played in college as well. My first year, I went to Maryville, played for the Maryville Fighting Scots.
Awesome.
It was in Tennessee. And what I realized then is that it wasn't always the fastest guy who got the starting position. It was the guy or the fastest or the biggest guy. It was always the one who understood the plays, worked hard to learn the playbook, could do a number of things, could catch and block, from a running back standpoint, being able to catch, block, read defenses. And that person was not necessarily the fastest or most gifted, but they knew where to be, when to be, and they supported the team, whatever call was. You have the fastest and strongest people. They just want the ball. Give me the ball so I can run. And then after that, it's up to everybody else to do their part. Yeah. And in any kind of team aspect, you have to have someone who's willing to do the grunt work, the hard work, blocking, which is supporting the quarterback when he comes back as a running back. And those are some of the things that I've learned as a running back, is that when I'm not getting the ball, I still have to support the team from blitzes and things of that nature. When I see somebody else goes down, I need to be able to help that lineman with his block or whatever to make sure the quarterback has time to throw the ball. So it's all about attitude and how you not only fit into the team, but support the team and understand the chemistry and what you have to do and execute those plans, whatever that may be. And that's what sports have helped me over throughout the life, understand and building my teams.
I love that. And, I did play some sports when I was younger, softball and things like that. And all of my boys played sports. And I think that sports really does teach you so many valuable life lessons.
Correct.
In business and really just in your personal life, right? On relationships, as well as how to achieve. And I was also in the military, the Army National Guard. My middle son is in the military, and then I come from a long line, grandfathers, et cetera, in the military. But in my experience, the military is also another great place for people to learn about teamwork and leadership and supporting others and leaving no one behind.
Correct.
And we're only as strong as, our weakest link, right? So there's so many great analogies in sports and military to translate to business and personal relationships. Okay, so my next question for you, I want to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence, which I love that, just in business in general, over the last 10 plus years, we talk about this so much more and the importance of it than we ever did, let's say 15 or 20 years ago. And more people are recognizing how crucial emotional intelligence is, not just, your IQ, but also your EQ. So when you think about emotional intelligence, how has that played a role in your success as a leader? And what advice would you give to aspiring leaders looking to strengthen this skill?
That's a great question. When we talk about emotional intelligence, when I think about it, I think of two things. And one of them is, well, I would just say you have to, it's about understanding emotional capacity, you know, the everything that plays into. There's more into it than just emotional intelligence. See, emotional intelligence is all about understanding who you are, your needs, your triggers that impact you, and also being able to identify that in others. In addition, there's another part to that called emotional control. And I've always, that's something that's big. We may be able to identify your triggers and others, but do you have the control, the ability to regulate the response when those triggers are pushed? You know, um, I really feel that the biggest two things that the foundation, emotional intelligence, I would say, let me just start, is more of a surface level discussion. I like to dig beneath the surface, go beneath there, and talk about things that set the foundation for your emotional intelligence, which is your spiritual capacity, in addition to your physical capacity. If you are tired, if you're not getting enough rest, you're not going to have the, how can I say it, the wherewithal or the strength to deal emotionally with when things come up. So I always tell not only myself to make sure that I'm getting the rest that I need, but also being able to get out and exercise, to be able to, how can I say, deal with regular day-to-day things. You may have to relieve some stress in order to deal with other stresses. All right. So that's how you relieve some stress. And that's you, how can I say it, open up that capacity to have empathy for someone else when they're going through some things. But there's also a spiritual component to that. I love the Lord. That's my foundation. I mean, I grew up as a kid going to Sunday school and church, and it's been with me ever since I've since inception. And so that's been my family's foundation. So with that, having those values, having that connection and that physical capacity, it allows me to understand who I am and be able to align my ideals and values with my spiritual self, or what I believe and whatnot. And that helps me to understand emotionally, identify those areas that I may feel that some things that may trigger me, and know when I need to step back. I have to understand what outcome before engaging, understanding what is the outcome that I want.
Mm-hmm.
And with this response, what's the likelihood am I going to get with that outcome? So sometimes it's all about stepping back, having the emotional intelligence to identify that someone's trying to push my buttons.
Yeah.
And then being able to come back with an answer that kind of supports the outcome that you want out of the conversation. I don't want to tit for tat back and forth. I would love to resolve the whatever issue we're going through with a path of moving forward together, as a team.
I love that.
Yeah. So the emotional intelligence is all about identifying those triggers, understanding who you are, but then understanding in your response, and your response to others is, what is the outcome that you want?
I love it. So, it's interesting that you mentioned your spiritual capacity, because several people that I've had on the podcast over the last few months have mentioned that as well. Faith in the Lord, and that's what keeps them grounded. And I personally, agree with that as well. And that's really my go-to. And regardless of what someone's personal beliefs are, I do think it's hugely important to have something that's bigger than yourself, that's outside of yourself, that you believe in, or that helps to support you, because I think it keeps you grounded, right?
It does.
And not just thinking about me. Something else that you mentioned, and I put up here on the screen, but, knowing yourself, knowing your triggers, asking yourself, what is the potential outcome here that I'm trying to achieve? achieve. But you said knowing when to step back. And so I put in big, bold letters, pause. And, the power of the pause, I think, is huge.
Correct.
Take a deep breath, counting to 10, maybe even excusing yourself from a situation or, sorry, that came up on my PC when it's supposed to be off. So sorry.
So,
Anyway, but knowing when maybe you need to take a moment and tell the other person, hey, I need some time to process this,
mhm,
think about this,
mhm,
and then let's come
mhm,
back together to find a solution,
mhm.
so that we can respond versus react, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Respond. And the biggest thing with that I've learned over the years is the physical capacity of it. Having that time to relieve the stress that you're going through in order to take on stress. You have to get rid of stress to take on stress. And
You
so
do.
that there are things that you have to, because it's not just work. You have things that's going on at home too. So sometimes you have to leave that stress that's at work so that you can deal with some of the things at home that you have to deal with, from marriage to kids to parents. That doesn't stop either. Siblings. So it's a balance. It really is a balance. And I think that physical part really helps with getting the proper rest and exercising, because if you do not, you're just going to be, what's going to come to your mind is, I just don't have time to deal with this. I don't have the
Mhm.
capacity to deal with this. I don't have, because you're just too tired, you know,
Absolutely.
physically.
And recognizing when you need those breaks. And
Yeah.
sometimes you can take a longer break, which I encourage people to do.
Hmm.
But sometimes maybe you only have time for a 15-minute break, but take it,
Right.
whether it's stepping
Right.
outside or doing a quick, exercise. Maybe you don't have time for a full-blown workout, but you can go for a walk, whatever it is. But knowing, those times where you start feeling overwhelmed or you start
Hmm.
feeling stressed, where maybe your responses to people are a little short or not as thoughtful or as healthy as they could be. Or maybe you have, sort of a clouded, you're feeling kind of cloudy in terms of your thinking. Those are all signs that it's time for a break. And
Right.
you do need to take them because you can't pour from an empty cup.
And you know what, Stephanie, you're absolutely correct. A lot of times that is driven by output. We get so task driven and trying to get things out that we don't want to take that time, because we're thinking
Mhm.
we're getting behind on producing, rather than taking the time to in order to, how could I say it, relieve that capacity, or to expand that capacity, that rest, that physical capacity you need in order to produce from task driven, but also from an emotional standpoint, support others, and being able to communicate the support that you need sometimes.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
I love
Sometimes
that.
we sometimes get locked into ourselves, and we don't share. We don't tell others that, hey, I might need a little support too.
Yeah,
I need a little help. So it's in, and from an empathy standpoint, or whatever you may be going through. So those are things that we have to engage in, and we have to keep front and center, and being able to balance that.
yeah, huge. Love it. Okay, so my next question. Organizations thrive when they are, I skipped over one. I'm going to go to a
That's
different
all
one. Hold
right.
on.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to think about all of the teams that you've worked with over the years, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Looking back, can you share a moment when you recognized that your leadership had truly transformed a team or an individual's career path?
Both a team and a career. I'm going to go back to when I was working with Avenir or whatnot. There was a person that I hired. She was working as a property manager. And the biggest thing is that we were just talking on the phone, and she told me that she was a gamer, that she gamed. And I was just thinking to myself, wow. I was looking at my daughter and thinking about my daughter as she played Mortal Kombat. We played together. and Laura Tooncroft, those games, and
Okay.
how she was so gifted and so good at going in the back end settings and changing those avatars and machine guns. And it was so robust and complex, those games. And when the young lady was telling me about her being a gamer, I thought about, wow, she knows the functional side of property management and using the system. She would be great because she probably has that intuition to be able to go into the back end and fully understand what's happening on the functional side just by going into the back end settings. So we talked, and I ended up hiring her, and she came in and was an immediate hit. I mean, my intuition was right.
That's
She
awesome.
was able to go in that back settings and just really flip through it, became an immediate hit on the team. And before you know it, she's still there. She's still, I believe she's maybe a manager or director now. She went from that up to like a manager or director now of the team or whatever. And that was, I think that was probably one of my better hires. I mean, I've had some good ones, but that one was strictly technical intuition right there to just be on the phone supporting her. And it wasn't even an interview or anything. I just heard that she played games, and I just thought about it and said, you know what, you probably be good in this position that's coming up. So it really worked out. It worked out for her, worked out for the company. And that is a huge success story. So from a leadership standpoint, you always have to be, how can I say it, open and creative to your next hire. Looking at they may not have the experience on that side, but do they have the skills? Do they have the technical intuition or the intuition to be able to thrive in a position that you may have? So it was just a creative way of looking at bringing in somebody that was on the functional side that had technical intuition skills.
I love that so much. So one of the things that I leverage DISC. I'm a DISC consultant, and I leverage Clifton Strengths with my clients. But Strengths is all about that, right? Really knowing what people are naturally good at, their natural strengths, talents, and abilities, and matching those with the responsibilities that you give to them. That's how we help people excel. So I love that you intuitively were like, this is a strength that she has. How can I use that in business to not only help the company and the team be successful, but to help her be successful? And people that leverage their strengths more are happier. They're more satisfied at work. They tend to work harder. So I love that you did that. That's a perfect example of how that works in reality. That's awesome. Okay, so let's talk about leading change for a moment.
Okay.
So my first question about leading change, which is something that we're both passionate about, you've obviously led several teams through change. What are some key lessons that you've learned about overcoming resistance, which happens naturally, and ensure smooth transitions?
Wow, that's a great question, and it's a great question, and it's really the foundation of my whole compelling message and framework of harmonize the mix, orchestrating the balance between people, process, and technology. I always say my compelling message is that if you want a company that embraces change, optimizes operations, and maximizes the effectiveness of technology, you must harmonize the mix. Harmonize the mix is orchestrating the balance between people, process, and technology. Much like crafting a hit song where all the components come together in perfect rhythm. And with that, the biggest thing here is the communication. People want to know what they're going to be doing or what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're going to do it. And guess what? They have to buy into it. And it must match up with the vision or mission of the company. Now, here's the kicker right here, Stephanie. It's not all about what the company is. I always say you can't be so shallow with the opportunities, meaning we always talk about what a solution is going to do for the company, what a change is going to do for the company. But there's a question that we're not answering, and that's from the individual. what about me?
Mhm.
What is this going to do for me? What is left over after all this is done? Why? What does this mean for me? I know I use this in a lot of my talks about the movie Dreamgirls, where Jennifer Hudson, she's in this group called the Dreamgirls. I don't know. Have you seen that movie?
I have.
Yeah. Well, that actual scene where Jamie Foxx or Curtis comes in and he's telling them they're going to be going on tour themselves and they're changing everything. And guess what? We're going to change the lead singer, and Effie, which is Jennifer Hudson. You're not going to be lead. You're going to be doing backup. And she was like, what? Without letting her know anything. What do you mean? And it all that went into a song of what about me? What about what I feel? What about my needs, as an individual? So when we look at this from a company standpoint, I always say, let's not be so shallow with the opportunities. We have to understand what this new technology, what this new process, what this is going to do for the individual so that they can buy into it. And a lot of times what happens is that they're processors, but this new technology is going to change them from being the processor to managing the process.
Mm-hmm.
And most people will buy into that all day. Managing a process. I'm not having to do this I'm not having to do these same steps over and over again. People get content. People get relaxed with that. So the biggest thing with resistance is the communication. Having that communication to know the who, what, why we're doing it, and also what is this going to do for you? Having that little cherry to say, what is this going to do for you? And from there, it must match up with the project objectives and the mission and vision in which the company is going. Because when you're telling somebody we're bringing in this new project, this new system or whatever, if it doesn't match up with what you've been preaching to them all, I shouldn't say preach, but speaking to them all year about where we're going and what we're trying to do, they're going to question it. Well, this doesn't align. You just can't come in making these arbitrary changes, bringing in these arbitrary CRMs because that's what the marketing director or the VP likes or whatnot. This is what she used and this is what she likes, but it doesn't match up with what we're trying to do as a company. Those are the things that will that communication, matching, aligning your decisions with visions and goals will I ain't gonna say automatically, but it will help with the resistance and buy-in to whatever projects or whatever decisions you're going when you're talking about change.
100%. And, you and I have talked about doing a session together on change, and we submitted one and it didn't get accepted last year, but we need to do that again.
Yeah.
You speak about it a lot, as do I. And, it's an area where so many organizations struggle. Like I mentioned during our opening, the statistics from Gallup and Pew Research say that over 75% of organizational change efforts fail. And
Correct.
They fail because people are not communicating effectively. They're not asking for feedback and buy-in. They're imposing big changes on teams. And then oftentimes they get frustrated and almost surprised at the resistance that happens because they don't understand the change cycle. And
Right.
that resistance is a part of it. It's a part of the cycle. It will happen. You cannot skip over it, gloss over it, avoid it, simply because because it's uncomfortable, right?
Correct.
So change is hard for all of us because we're human. We are emotional beings who are sometimes logical. And so change is going to be hard for everyone. It's harder for some than others, but it's typically hard for most when it's a change that they didn't get to, let's say, vote for or be a part of or help to craft. And so not everybody's going to have an opportunity within the company to vote on the change initially because it just needs to happen to move the organization forward. But that's especially why, as you mentioned, it's so essential to give them an opportunity to digest it and give them enough time to do that, what I see happening in companies is we are not giving people enough time to digest the change. And while the executive team has been talking about it, let's say for 6 months, by the time it hits the people who it's going to touch or impact the most, maybe they have 30 days or 60 days to get comfortable with it. Sometimes it's not even that much. So we can't be surprised when there's a ton of resistance or confusion
right.
or pushback, because they haven't had the luxury of all of the discussions that the decision makers have been in.
Right.
And so, what I advise people to do is, as you mentioned, communicate, but communicate earlier than you think you should.
Correct.
And certainly, while you may not be able to communicate everything on the front, that's okay. What can you communicate? Even something as simple as, hey, this is coming next quarter, or this is coming next year. And here's the reason why we're going to be making this big change. And as you mentioned, here's how it's going to benefit you.
Correct. You're right.
That's left out often.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise that change is difficult or it fails, because there is an actual process and there is an actual emotional cycle that everyone will go through. And so I think the more that we can help leaders and companies understand that, the better that they can set themselves up for success when they are leading change and when they are implementing new processes, which oftentimes is technology, right?
Correct. And like you said, that cherry, what is the benefit that this is going to bring to the person who's going to be impacted?
Yeah.
They have to understand this change is going to impact them as well. It's not just get on the train because we're going here. It's getting on the train because you're going with us, and you're going to be in another place. You're going to evolve it's all about evolving rather enduring the change.
I love that.
And that's the biggest thing. And the problem is that one of the reasons for resistance is we get too caught up in the output that has to be done in order to get through the change. When you see a whole list of items that you have to do, the first thing you think of is, I don't have time for all this. I don't have the capacity for this, That's what I'm talking about. So we started looking at it that instead of looking at, where am I going to be after all this is done?
Yeah.
Focusing on where you're going to be, what this is going to do for you career-wise. Where will I be? Where will I evolve? What's going to be the end result for me going on this? And if you put that down there, people will chase after that. They will go through hell and high water, I guess. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but they will go through it. Fire and brimstone, whatever it may be, they may go through it in order to get to that place where they see life will be better for them.
Love it. And I think another thing that's important that I want to mention before we get to our next question is not only giving them the vision of the end result and the pie in the sky panacea, this is where we want to be, but acknowledging, hey, it's going to be beautiful when we get there, but the road to get there is rocky.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some pitfalls, and it's going to be a little muddy and messy. Setting that expectation so that people know, hey, it's going to require all of us to roll up our sleeves and to work hard together. And we'll learn along the way. And that's why we're going to communicate. So if something's painful or messy, or you're like, hey, this isn't really working the way that we thought it was, well, let's talk about that so that we can pivot, right? Pivot on that. So that we can pivot and make it even better. But it requires all of that. But setting that expectation that it's not going to be pretty getting there, I think, is huge, because sometimes, and again, it's done with good intentions, but sometimes the picture that's painted is this beautiful picture without acknowledging the tough road to get there. And that's where we kind of disillusion our team. And then they say, well, wait a minute, you said it was going to be this, but right now it's this, and I don't like it. So setting that expectation that you're not going to like the road necessarily, but you'll like the, what's at the end of the road.
Correct. And I remember going through a situation like that one time with the team. We were doing an onboarding of a new CRM, ERP, property management system. And the biggest part was that during that time, we got to a point where it was a lot going on, and the team was like, we don't know. I mean, we were a small team for migrating this, and the team was like, how could I say it? They weren't sure where they were going. They weren't sure if this was going to work. And I remember sitting there with them and saying, this is exactly where we need to be. We knew that there would be some ambiguity. So we knew that there were going to be some times that we weren't sure if certain things were going to work as they should. So this is nothing new, but this is the time where we have to strap up, we have to communicate, get in our huddle calls, and let's prioritize what do we need to get through first, And once we itemized what we didn't understand and what we need to do and just went down and prioritized it, the more confident they got in where we're going, as long as we were making strides to move forward. And they were involved in it. So
love it. Yeah. Involve your team. And you mentioned making strides, but when you make those strides, celebrate those quick wins along the way, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Love it.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk a little bit about diversity. So as you and I both know, organizations thrive when they embrace diverse perspectives. How have you seen inclusive leadership contribute to successful transformation?
Yeah, that is a great question, because when you have, I would say, a talent team of leadership team from different backgrounds, different cultures, different backgrounds, different genders, all together, you get a lot of really good ideas. Especially, I really feel the foundation of that is having a psychologically safe place to discuss issues and stuff. I remember being on a team that was very diverse, women, men, different cultures, different religions. I mean, we used to talk about everything. And one of the things was that when we got into that executive table and we talked about what we needed to do, everybody's ideas were challenged. But it wasn't because we didn't like each other. It was the idea. We felt psychologically safe saying, no, I don't like it. Or no, it's well, not necessarily, but you would give a reason why you don't like it. But we felt psychologically safe in voicing our opinions. And the best part about it is that we used to have these strategic meetings, and they used to get a little heated, but we used to go to lunch right afterwards, and and everything would be all right, and we'll come back and we were like, okay, well, maybe I was a little bit, I get what you're saying. And, we would move on, and we would make these changes and implementations and actually talk about the impact that these changes made when we did it, and go back. It's almost like how can I say it, a retrospect when we doing this. So the diversity part of it, I love it. I love getting the different mindsets. I love to get the different opinions. I love getting a different view, because mine may only be based on the experiences that I went through. And it may be, how could I say it? The experiences that I went through. And when you bounce it off somebody else who had a different experience in a different environment, you can see that, well, maybe it was, you can measure, well, probably the reason that did not work in mine was because my environment wasn't as healthy and supportive as theirs. You get what I'm saying? So you can measure certain things when you hear experiences that people went through with certain things. So I love the fact of having that diversity and inclusiveness, so that especially when you have a lot of talent, you get a lot of great ideas. You get a lot of feedback. It challenges you. And that's something I love. I love feedback. Tell me what I didn't do wrong. Tell me whatever. I went from not necessarily liking it years ago starting out, but now I love it because I see the benefit of it. It makes you stronger. It evolves. It helps you to evolve. It helps you to get better. Yeah. And I love giving feedback too, because I want them to know. I want them to get better or whatever. So again, I think in any kind of setting, whether it's if you have in a diverse, inclusive environment, there has to be a level of psychological safety. Everybody needs to feel that they are welcome, that they're appreciated, and that their opinions matter. And that, regardless, that is the foundation of it all. And with that, you can have a very powerful team that can lead you to great success.
Absolutely. So a couple of things that you mentioned that I want to touch on again or reiterate. And I actually just got back from Raleigh this week. I was facilitating a leadership lyceum session for the Triangle Apartment Association. And one of our the sessions that I do is based on the 5 dysfunctions of a team by Patrick Lencioni that you're very familiar with.
Definitely.
And so as we talked through how to overcome those dysfunctions and moving to function, at the baseline is trust, right? So lack of trust is the biggest dysfunction on a team. Without trust, you have nothing, and
Correct.
you really can't move, to the other levels of the pyramid. But once you've established trust, which is part of creating a psychologically safe space, as you mentioned, then the other dysfunction is fear of conflict. And when we have fear of conflict, we don't have things like healthy debates, like you mentioned. So we have to create that safe space, because we do want to be able to debate in those meetings, because that's how you really get everyone sharing their honest opinion and feedback and viewpoints. I tell people, even if your opinion is the unpopular one in the room or the only one like it, it's valuable, because if we hear those various opinions, those diverse perspectives, then the outcome is, once we've hashed it all out and arrived on what we think is the best decision, we've heard all viewpoints, and now we're making better decisions as a result of it. And sometimes your unpopular opinion may be the one that helps us to formulate a better decision. But if we don't make it psychologically safe, then we can't debate healthily where we disagree with one another. Then that doesn't happen, and we end up creating artificial harmony in the meeting. But then outside the meeting, people are talking and, sidebar conversations, and then it's like we're on a hamster wheel and we're not making progress.
Right. I love what you said, that artificial harmony. I don't like anything artificial.
Yep.
Except Kool-Aid. But anyway, let's way back then. But I love what you said right there, the artificial harmony or whatnot, because that is something that talking about that last idea or experience that I had with a very diverse, talented, open, psychologically safe space. I've been on the opposite side of that too, where it wasn't psychologically safe. Nobody felt safe. Matter of fact, you were told, don't say this, don't mention this, say it this way, only give this much. And you were just in those meetings like, oh, nothing's wrong, knowing that there was a ton of stuff wrong. We don't want to let them know, it was, I did not like that at all. And
and that's usually based on, a leader or a leadership team leading with fear, their own fear, but then also they're instilling that fear in the rest of the team. And when you have that fear-based leadership style where you can't be vulnerable, you can't be honest, you can't say what really needs to be said, it ends up not just hurting the team, but I'm going to guess that company lost some really good people as a result of it.
Every day, every week. It was like a revolving door, and it became and when you have such a revolving door of people coming in and out due to those type of places, what happens is that it puts a lot of strain on the teams that are training and supporting, because you're constantly having to go back to people that are coming in and making the same mistakes over and over again. And you're never able to, how can I say it, scale up in talent, that it holds that back. And then you have people, there's no innovative. No, everybody just keeps their mouths shut. They're trying to get to the next paycheck. And that's what just get to the next paycheck, keep going. They tend to put their passion now outside of work. They just come in to do the bare minimum, get the check and go. And then there's no innovation. People continue to do the same thing. There's no growth. There's no evolution, and everything just stays stagnant. And while you hear, and that was one thing. And then you go out and you go into these conferences and you see other people are doing big things with technology and stuff. And you're still dealing with some of the stuff that's been going on for 10 or 15 years. And that was very challenging because it pulls away resources, your resources. You know, you're working harder because people won't change their processes or whatnot. So it has a huge physical and mental impact on you. So that psychological save, that being able to openly discuss new ideas, being challenged, that's so healthy.
So healthy. Well, and not just in teams, but really, you know, you can use the 5 dysfunctions of a team for families, for any type of relationship,
Correct.
friendships, your kids. You have to establish that trust, have that healthy conflict. That's how you gain commitment and buy-in. Something you said earlier about people being involved, you know, and getting their feedback is huge. But one of Patrick Lencioni's sayings when we talk about gaining commitment versus lack of commitment is people don't buy in if they don't weigh in.
Right. Right. They don't buy in unless they don't weigh in. I love that. I love that.
Which is everything that you're talking about here with making it psychologically safe so that we do have a voice and we are heard and our input and thought leadership matters, right?
And it goes back to that same, you're absolutely correct. And it brings me back to another example of when I came into this place, company, and the team was a little static. They didn't have they weren't very productive or whatnot. And with it being so quiet, people didn't say anything. I was able to, one of the things that I realized is we had to set some new goals for the department, a mission, who we were going to be to everybody else, and having them to give input in on what matters most to them, words that matters most, whether it's being smart, being I forgot a lot of stuff, integrity, you know, things of that nature, things that matter. Having that input, we were able to build the team that we want by everybody putting in the values that they appreciate the most. So their values together became our values. Their input became our mission. And every time before every meeting and stuff, we would repeat, this is who we say we are. This is who we say we're going to be. And these are the things that we're going to do, the 4 pillars that we're going to do to support this mission. So it set the tone for every meeting, every day, and how we went about it. And we were able to get systems in. We were able to give support. We were able to triple the amount of productivity we were able to do. And I think that having people weigh in and establish those ideals for who you want to be is so important to building.
So important. I love that so much. So I was helping one of my clients last year establish their mission, vision, values, and customer value proposition. And before we talked about the values of the organization, we did exactly that. I'm like, I want you to think about you as a human, an individual. What are your personal values, and jot those down. And that was our jumping off point, right?
Right.
Because they need to be aligned with the organization. So I love that so much. That's a whole nother session we can talk about. So my last set of questions is about resiliency, both building resilient teams as well as your own personal resiliency as a leader. And you touched on a little of this, you know, when I asked you the first question about your philosophy. Let's talk a little bit more about resilience and what other things have you done to cultivate resilience within your teams, and what additional strategies have been most effective in keeping morale strong during challenging times?
Yeah, keeping that. Some of the things I remember starting out and just identifying the word resilience, meaning putting it out in front of everyone. You know, we say it, but do we really know what it means? Do we? I mean, we say fighting through or whatever, but what does that really mean? You know, and really breaking it down and showing examples of resilience. You know, from a person continually to run, even when they are so hurt and trying to get to the finish line and finish a marathon. That's resilience. They did all of this training, and at this time they could have just given up, but they kept going. And they're seeing the resilience in a hospital. When I remember bringing in, showing an example of an emergency room and the resilience of the doctors when there was a mass shooting, and what it was like bringing people in, and how they had to bandage certain people up, get people, how could I say it, attention, and giving them the support needed, even though they were overwhelmed with the amount of tragedies that they were having coming in. So it's that ability and mindset, for one, to knowing in order to keep going and having the faith that we're going to get there and things are going to be good. But it's also continuously communicating that the finish line is near. It's also communicating who we are as individuals and as a team, and also having that, again, that buy-in from people, that connection. Really and truly, that's the biggest thing, the connection, cultivating that culture that embraces the change and supports each other through it. Because there are going to be some times where people are, how can I say it, are down or tired physically. The capacity is not there. Do I have enough capacity to support them? At times, everybody, as humans, we go through things in life, and it's going to impact either work or home or whatever that may be. Do I have the capacity to come back from home and support my wife? She's feeling she's had to work a little bit longer, so I need to cook dinner tonight or buy dinner or whatever. It's a thing with personal life and professional lives too. What's her name? Her husband may be a coworker. Husband may be going through chemo, and I know she's spending a lot of nights with him. Can I pitch in and get some of her work done or whatever, even though she's still working? That's that resilience that we embrace as a team, not just individually, but as a team as well. So it works all throughout in both of our lives, not only on a professional side, but the personal side. It's communicating, giving examples of resilience, but also examples that motivates, touches, moves, and inspires them to want to be the example, be the change that they want to show, and that they want others that they want to see in others.
I love that. Okay, so my next question is, obviously leadership comes with intense pressures. It's very rewarding to lead and develop people. One of my business coaches says every problem that he's ever had in business has a first name and a last name. So working with people is rewarding, but it is also challenging because, as I said earlier, we are emotional beings that are sometimes logical, right?
Right.
So when you think about leadership and the pressure that comes along with that, you've talked a lot about supporting and leading teams, but how do you personally, Marcus, maintain resilience to prevent burnout? And you mentioned that earlier a little bit, but talk to me a little bit more, like, what are some additional things that you do to maintain your own resilience and prevent burnout?
Okay, you don't hit one on there, Stephanie. I went through burnout. I did. That's one thing. I went through that before, and it was primarily because I was driven, ambitious. Well, I ain't gonna say ambitious, but just driven to getting things done, wanting to get things done, and staying up 2 and 3 at night, just getting things done. And it started years and years ago, and it became a cycle into the end. And that's what I realized about not having that physical capacity. So everything that I'm talking about, I live, and I get a little choked up about it because it was scary because the doctor, I had to go to the doctor, and he had to make me aware of what I was doing to myself, and to know that. So I had to push back. I had to not push back, but just step back. Sorry. So now, or even then, but even more now, I realized I didn't know the impact that exercising, sleep does for you. I did, and now I realize even more of what it does for you physically, emotionally, intellectually. So I go to sleep now. I actually, when it hits 1 o'clock, I'm down. And shit,
Yeah.
I went from 3 to 1 o'clock now. So
That's
I'm
good.
making
And
strides.
so do you consider yourself to be, or have you ever been a perfectionist?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay. So
yes.
hello, my friend. Welcome to my club, but it's the
Mhm.
Recovering Perfectionist Club.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I still will work, burn the midnight oil. I did that twice this week while I was traveling, partially because I'm, traveling. I don't have, my son at home. It's me. So I'm going to just
Mhm.
knock things out when I'm not
Right,
distracted by anyone. And I do that frequently. But then last night I was exhausted and I needed to work on stuff, but I had already pulled like 2 super late nights into the wee hours in the morning.
mhm,
And so last night I told myself, okay, you're so tired, your eyes hurt.
right.
And I had flown home from Raleigh. And so I hit a stopping point last night and I actually went to bed at 9, which I rarely do, because I told myself it's that self-talk,
Wow,
like
that's early.
you have to
Yeah,
take a
yeah,
break. You're that stuff will be there. Yes, you've got to get it done, but you also need to be fully functional tomorrow and the next day. And you're at a point where you're reaching the breaking point, right?
correct,
And
correct.
so I think we learn that it's important to do that. But I want to say one other thing. I loved that you were vulnerable and shared with me and our listeners that you did reach burnout, because I think when we share our experiences of what we've gone through,
Mhm.
and use that as a way to help others, using our mess as our message, our test as our testimony, turning our trials into triumph, we
Mhm.
are in the best possible position to help the former version of us who
Right,
may be going through that right now,
right,
and who may be able to hear something that we say, a tip, a story, whatever, to help them hopefully before they reach that breaking point, right? So thank
right.
you for sharing, because I hope, whether it's a listener that's listening live or catches the replay,
Mhm.
there's probably something about, your story, Marcus, what you're sharing, or maybe something that I'm sharing, that someone hears them like, oh my gosh, that's the exact message that I needed to hear, because I'm going through that right now. So thank
Right.
you for
Oh,
sharing.
you're welcome. Yeah, yeah,
Vulnerable.
yeah. I feel like I had to, and I would say that I think that's something I had to go through that in order to be able to say this today. And
Yeah.
I had to go through that in order to create that framework of the mix method, the harmonize the mix, that whole compelling message and everything. All of that is based on everything that I went through, from the good times, the bad times, the challenging environments, and also the great environments that I was in at the end. What caused the burnout, and what I could have done better, with that. And it's all, again, orchestrating the whole concept of orchestrating the balance between people, process, and technology. You have to create that environment that you want for yourself to accomplish anything that you want. You have to align those processes with what you're trying to choose, what you're trying to do, based on whether it's losing weight, based on company things or whatever. You have to align your habits with that and process with it. And then just leverage technology in order to get insights on how well you're doing. Not only to automate some things, but just get insights on how well that you're doing, so that you can make changes. Am I waking up early enough? Am I going to sleep? My wife is a good example of that, because she used that whole the methodology, and she's lost so much weight, and she's a trainer. She took the test for the what they call it, a certified trainer. She
Yeah. My oldest son is one. That's his goal.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
awesome.
So she did that, and she did the whole thing. She has a scale in here that she was weighing herself daily. She was going to work out. She was watching her sleep, what she eats. She has to know how much protein she needs. I mean, she got it down to a science, and I was like, wow, you man, you're harmonizing the mix. You are in harmony, and she has it in harmony. Looks great now. I
That's
mean, she
awesome.
looked great then, but wow, she's really on it now. So yeah,
Yeah.
I have to.
I love that so much.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So, and you and I chatted recently, but we're both
Right.
on our own health and fitness journeys. And, I've lost 50 pounds. It's taken 2 years and I'm not done,
Yeah.
but I do feel so much better. And, I had gotten to the point where, not that I wasn't taking care of myself, but I wasn't taking care of myself, not in the right
Right.
way. I wasn't getting enough sleep. When you travel,
Yeah.
don't always make the best decisions when you're out to dinner, eating with people, things like that. And,
Mhm.
I made the shift and I'm like, okay, I travel with my protein
Mhm.
shakes and my
Mhm.
supplements and all the things. And
Mhm.
it does make such a difference to help you show up better
Correct.
every day,
Right.
right? It
Right.
helps your
Right.
mind when your body is in better shape and when we're, as you mentioned, in harmony.
Correct.
It makes such a difference. All
Mhm.
right, so two more questions.
Yeah.
My last one is also about diversity.
Mhm.
So, underrepresented business professionals and leaders often face additional expectations or pressures in leadership roles.
Oof.
How have you built resilience in the face of these types of challenges?
Ooh, okay, unrepresented.
Yeah.
That's a good one because I would be one
Yeah.
in a lot of areas. That growing up as an African American man, there are a lot of times where you find yourself in places where you're the only one, and that's been my Stephanie. That's been. I think I was prepared for this since years ago when I played high school baseball. I was only black on the team at one time. There was only two of us on the team. And even in college, when I went and played baseball, I was the only African American man on the team or whatnot. And I've always been in that position. So I just felt that, in a sense, God was preparing me for what life would be moving forward. So it's not that one of the things I would say with resilience, in a sense, in any sense, whether you're a woman, male in a woman's dominated arena or whatever, the biggest thing is just staying true to your values, but also understanding the environment that you're in. Um, Also, as a resilience, you're there. It should be more about the team and being a and contributing to the team rather than standing out. Be a good contributor to the team, support others, and with that, people will see what a great team member you are rather than you just being maybe the only woman on the team or the only black male or the only male or black woman, whatever that may be, in
Yeah.
that sense, and being one of few in that arena. So a good, the biggest, those things do attribute to that. So for me, that's what I've been done. But I do find, I will say, the challenge is for me is sometimes being misunderstood,
Mm.
you know. And the same, I find that in a lot of women that I talk to, and at times when they're the only women there, is being misunderstood, and that has
What do you
been.
think? I'm going to interject for a
No,
second.
no,
What
go
do you
ahead. Yeah.
think? Because I have my own opinions from my viewpoint, of being
Hmm.
a woman and now a single mom,
Hmm.
older single mom, right? All those things. So I have my own viewpoint. But from your perspective, when you say misunderstood, when you are that, minority representative of you, right? Of someone like you in a room
Hmm.
full of people, let's
Hmm.
say me in a room full of old white men, for example,
Hmm.
um, or you in a room full of old white men, whatever.
Yes.
What do you think contributes to you being misunderstood? Like, why are they misunderstanding you, in your opinion?
uh in my opinion, I'm just gonna go and say it. I mean,
Yeah, just say it. I mean, we're here. This is real. This is
yeah,
real talk here, my friend.
okay. I'm just gonna. a lot of times they're isolated. They're throughout life, they've never been in other arenas or whatever with people like me. Most of them have not. They go by what they see on TV or what they hear. And then when someone comes in, it's like an oxymoron to them at times, smart black guy. What? Or they feel that you are a charity case or whatnot. They feel that they have to, and then they feel that they have to be, how could I say, mindful of what they say, which, in some instances, yeah, I can understand it. But they don't think, sometimes they don't think you are capable of certain things. So they sometimes kind of keep you out of certain discussions at times. And you're constantly trying to prove yourself, but you're also constantly, I feel that with me, I sometimes leave a portion of who I am. I feel that until sometimes I have to humble myself too much. I've seen other guys and women get passionate about a particular idea, project, or whatever. And they are allowed to show that passion. I can't show that passion. I've showed it one time, and what did I do that for? And some, and that's why I said that misunderstood, where they see my passion as, how could I say it, militant maybe at times, and they may see some women's passion as being emotional and weak or whatever, but they can,
the opposite, right? Emotional and the B word, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever negative word that you want to fill in the blank, right?
Correct.
And I do think that happens. I think it happened a whole lot more 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yes.
I think because we are focusing, more organizations, like when COVID happened, finally said, okay, now that, all this stuff is happening in our country with Black Lives Matter and, civil unrest and all of that, like we need to wake up and do something. And so more organizations adopted diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging programs, which I think is great. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
Correct.
But the media doesn't help us at all because, and not to get on a political rant at all, but, I'm a Maxwell certified coach, right? And one of the books that John Maxwell wrote and released last year is called High Road Leadership. And the tagline of the book is bringing people together in a world that divides. And he really wrote it in response to all of the political divide in our country.
Correct.
But it's not just political divide, it's just dividing people in general. And so unfortunately, I think all of those negative messages that we see and hear in, the news outlets and social media, and people like jump on the bandwagon, doesn't help matters any, right? When we could be focusing more on, okay, what can we do to bring people together in a world that divides? And I do think, honestly, we have to do that outside of our political realm. I think it takes each of us, who are passionate about leadership and building teams, to be the change that you wish to see in the world. And you referenced that earlier, right?
Right.
I think we have to do that. But back to your point, though, it is unfortunate that, because we're talking about the importance of healthy conflict and diverse perspectives on teams and being open and vulnerable and all of those things. But it's unfortunate when we're in environments where we want to do that.
Right.
But doing so comes with a higher risk, because there is the potential that will be labeled something negative, or it could even have even more negative ramifications, because it isn't what you said earlier. It isn't a safe space to be authentically honest and vulnerable and open.
Correct. I remember having a conversation with a young lady one time. We were really good friends several years ago. And when I was able to be, how can I say it? We were referring to something that was happening at work. We were both executives. And I got so comfortable with her that I showed her another side of me, I would say. And we were referring to something that happened at work. And she was like, oh my gosh. When I told her, she laughed and she's like, oh my God, I just love when you just open up and be yourself or whatnot,
Yeah.
and that made me feel so good that she could appreciate that part of me. And since then, we used to have these great conversations. She was Jewish, and me African American. We were able to have these great conversations about our stereotypes, about how we feel we have to be in certain places in order to negate the stigma that is placed on us. And I didn't know all the stuff that she felt that she had to do. And I knew it was telling her. And there was just so many similarities there. And it was a great conversation. But that's when you produce those psychological safe spaces, those are the type of enriched conversations that can really help a bond between individuals in a corporations, which help with the support, which help with the team building and whatnot. And it was just a great time, and we became very good, very close friends or whatever, and still keep in touch with her today. So yeah, that's having that conversation was just I remember us leaving Denver and we were traveling and we were on the way back, and we talked from the time we left the hotel all the way till we landed in the Fort Lauderdale. I mean, you wouldn't even have known that. It felt like it was 2 hours going by, and it was more like 6. Denver's about 3-4 hours. But again, it was just a great conversation and just a giving and taking and just understanding there. And I will always remember that day or whatnot. But yeah,
that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're actually a little bit over time, but this is such a great conversation. We could go like another hour or so. And I do have one more question, but I do want to thank you, Marcus, for just being open and honest and vulnerable. And I think, just with everything that you've said, those of us, if you're again listening now or listening to the replay, if this resonates with you, the message that we want you to receive is be you, because everyone else is taken.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that every single person, regardless of their background, where they come from, we are all similar in a way that as humans, right? And so we want to look for that connection and similarity while also embracing the unique differences and diversity and what makes all of us just multifaceted human beings. And together, when we bring together people with diverse backgrounds and thoughts, et cetera, we are so much better as a team and an organization. And I think also, like we travel a lot, right? And I think people who have had the benefit of traveling to different places, you just learn to embrace diversity and to really kind of look for it and welcome it, because you see such a different view of the world. But if you're listening to this, I want to encourage you to be vulnerable and be you. And I challenge you to break those assumptions that people may have and biases that they may have. And yes, it's scary, but we have a responsibility also to not play small when we're in environments that want to keep us in that small little cocoon or small little square or box us in. We have a responsibility as individuals to break outside of that. And I think the more that we do that, people like you and me, Marcus, and encourage others to do the same, the more that we can break those barriers that sometimes are invisible but do exist.
Right, exactly. I totally agree with that.
So when I first started this series, not the podcast has been around for a little while, but I started this series a couple months ago with interviewing specifically people who are either in multifamily or support the multifamily space. It was in preparation for Residential Property Management Careers Week.
Mm-hmm.
And so my last question for you, for any of our listeners who are interested in learning more about residential property management careers or careers in multifamily housing, maybe you're already in the industry and you're an emerging leader, or maybe you are not yet in the industry or want to learn more. Marcus, for existing or future leaders wanting to grow their careers, what key advice would you offer to those looking to become more successful leaders in this space?
To be more successful leaders in this space, I would say the biggest thing that you can do is really home in on your relationship building, with people. This is a people-centric industry. No matter what the technology and processes that are coming in, whatever, it's still people-centric. And your communication skills and the ability to build relationships, articulate yourself in such a way that everyone understands, be yourself, making people feel comfortable with you and around you, whatnot, and just being who you are, and having your standing on your values too, having some value system that you stand on, and not just talk about it, be about it. When your values, they see it within you, they respect that even more when you do what you say. You are who you say you are.
Yeah.
So that holds a lot of weight in this. That holds a lot of weight, because I tell you, there's a lot of artificial humans, not just intelligence. There's a lot of artificial humans running around here, or whatever. And they sound good. And I'm telling you, they can put some really nice sentences together, but they are not who they say they are, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing, is just standing 10 toes down on who you are, being who you are, articulating, being honest, have integrity, and just building those relationships. That's the next thing. And continue to grow, understanding what advocating for the industry is and what that means. That's something that I learned this year and got into it. I got involved with MEMS, melanin and multifamily. You got to understand, I've been in this industry for over 20 years now, almost over 20 years. And this is the first time I've ever been in a place where I've been on teams where it's just majority, or all melanin, African-American, Black people or whatnot. And there's, yes, MEMS. Yeah. And it has been so great. It's been such a huge, I'm here right now, probably because of the, what I've seen them do. Those girls, and I'm gonna knock out some names: Monica Frazier, Dana Duckworth, and Ashia. I keep saying Ashia, but I'm saying Ashia. I said it.
Shepherd.
Yeah, Ashia Shepherd, because I got called out by Marcy. For
Marcy, yes, Marcy French. Marcy's going to be a guest tomorrow. I'm so excited about talking to her. Yeah,
exactly. And Ty Jackson. I mean, just watching them get out here and do their thing or whatnot. And Candace, it has been such a huge impact and inspiration to me. But just starting that whole group where we would be able to share and share our ideas, share our thoughts, what we've gone through, and things of that nature. I was able to share some things with them that I haven't told even my wife, that happened to me years ago. It was so embarrassing or whatnot. But just to be able to let that go and move forward, to have that space. But not only to have that space, but the space just it's not there to support African Americans or melanin Blacks. It's also to support the industry too. They're the ones who got me open into advocating for the industry, going to advocate. That was huge for me to see that. And now I'm all in. So MEMS has been really, really powerful. So again, relationship building, being yourself, and being comfortable being yourself or whatnot.
I love that so much. And I just registered this morning for the MEMS mixer.
Yeah.
couple weeks. I came last year. It was super
Uh-huh.
fun, although I had like 3 places to be. So I came in at the tail end last year. But it was awesome. And I'm so glad to see them doing it again this year. And I think, what you've shared, Marcus, is such a powerful message. Everything that you've shared with me today, but it's such a powerful message for our listeners. But particularly in terms of growing your career, or you're just maybe getting involved in multifamily, get involved. If I think about the most impactful relationships that I have in my life today, they weren't just cultivated from the companies that I worked within, although that was a huge part of it. But
Correct.
I was really fortunate to work for a company for over 2 decades that supported my involvement in the industry and supports others' involvement in the industry. And so because of that, I, sat on committees, and I, I'm past president of the Education Institute at NAA.
Okay.
And I did multiple other things. I spoke at conferences, even though I had, a full-time role within my organization. But so many of my relationships today are because I got involved, because I
Right.
built relationships.
Right.
I met you at a conference, right?
Exactly.
One of my best
Yeah.
friends who lives in Pennsylvania, she and I met at my business coaches conference about 3.5 years ago. And I can't imagine not having her in my life, both, personally and professionally in business. We've done some exciting stuff together. But every single person that came as a speaker to my Live to Lead event in Atlanta, which you and I should talk about that, by the way, I met at a conference, and I can remember exactly when I met them, the exact conversation. Some of these happened years and years ago,
Right.
but it's huge. So for those of you listening, do not underestimate the power of getting involved and in volunteer leadership. And as Marcus mentioned, MIMS is something that's been so impactful in his life. And that all resulted from people who are involved and, want to give back and do something more.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. MIMS has been very, very helpful to me. I didn't go to my first NAA until this past year in February, until MIMS. And I tell you, Stephanie, it was so wonderful. I mean, it was so impactful to me because I felt so that I belonged there. For one, there were so many other African Americans, Blacks who were there, and it was like every time I just walked by a brother, it was a dap. Hey, what's going on? Didn't have to know him or whatever, but it's just that acknowledging that we're here and we're supporting the industry, and that's what it's all about.
Well, and we all, again, we are emotional beings who are sometimes logical, but we all have such a strong need for belonging, which is why it's so important that we find that for ourselves, but that we also create those spaces for others to find a place where they can belong, where they can participate, where they can give back, where their voices are heard. So I cannot wait to see you there in a couple of weeks. So our conversation was like an hour and a half, but I loved every single minute of it. And we are going to follow up to talk about sessions that we're going to do together.
Exactly.
And maybe schedule a follow-up conversation too, because I think there's a lot of things that we talked about, some of which we could unpack a little bit more for our listeners.
Absolutely.
Shout out, by the way, to Eddie Williams and Crystal Dukes, who have been with us live, and I put some of their comments on here. I wanted to thank, yes. What's up, Eddie? What's up, Crystal?
Hey, Crystal.
And for anyone else listening. But I want to thank my friend and business leader, Marcus, with Pivotal Impact, for joining me today for this incredible discussion. For our listeners, either whether you're with us live or you're going to catch the replay, stay tuned for more. I will be interviewing several other thought leaders over the next few weeks. So please join us. If you liked what you heard today, please post a comment, share it with your friends, share some of Marcus's messages, tag me, tag him. But thank you so much for attending and listening to the You Deserve More podcast spotlight interview series today with our guest, Marcus. And Marcus Wilson. Sorry, Marcus. And signing off for now, I'm your host, Stephanie Puryear-Helling. Make it a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.